There are several times where I pulled off the road where I pulled off at a like a rest stop or a gas station just to get water so I could pour it on myself. Like I would get a bottle of water, dump it on myself, get back in the car, keep driving. That was air conditioning. I have this YouTube channel and I do car stuff, and I'm known for doing car stuff on YouTube. But even before, and this is true of you also, even before the YouTube channel, I did crazy stuff, like with cars. I didn't need it to be on film, and then I got it on film, and then I started making money from it. It was great. It was like Hoovy. Hoovy would be Hoovy if he didn't have a camera and wasn't making money from it. But he's very fortunate that he can make some money doing this. So in 2011, in July of 2011, I decided what I needed was a Lotus Elise. And I didn't have much money at the time, but I realized something that remains true, which is you could buy and sell an Elise for the same money, and they were pretty reliable. At the time, it was 30 grand. It's gotten a little higher. But for 30 grand, you could buy a 0506 Elise, drive it for however long you wanted, and sell it for 30 grand. That was just the rule. But I really wanted a bright color. A lot of the Elises around me were silver or black, and it was like, that's kind of isn't the point of the car. I want to show off. You know, I was 23. I wanted to show off. I wanted to have this exotic car. So I really wanted a bright color. And what I really wanted was Krypton green. But as I recall, that color didn't come till like 07, and I could really only afford an 05 and maybe stretch to an 06. And so I ended up settling for an orange one. But the catch was, it was in San Jose, and I lived in Atlanta. In July of 2011, I flew. This is the kind of thing I would do now. It's actually the kind of thing I wouldn't do now. I'm beyond, I think it's insane that I ever did this, let alone didn't make up videos about it. Like the only way you can justify a cross-country Elise road trip is by making YouTube videos, but I did it just for funsies. And so I bought the Elise and I drove it from San Jose to Atlanta. There were several problems. One was, I arrived in San Jose to pick up the car late at night, and the dude was Indian and came from this like very traditional Indian family, and his mother insisted, I just flown across the country, she insisted I must stay for dinner. And she made this giant spread, and I was driving to Santa Cruz that night from San Jose. It's like an hour and a half, and I was like, I'm in this Lotus Elise, I've never driven this car before, it's dark, I need to get on the road. And she's like, no, you must have more food. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta get out of here. But fine, so I stayed, I had the meal with the family, whatever. The next problem was the Elise came with a soft top or a hard top. The hard top was on the car. Now, the Elise didn't have a place to stow the hard top. And so if I wanted the hard top, which obviously I did for myself and for resale purposes, I had to leave the hard top on the car. And I'm tall, so getting in and out of the car, I had to do the whole cross-country drive with the hard top on. It's actually quite easy to get in and out of an Elise with no top on. You just kind of plop in. But with the top on, it is an act of like unbelievable contortion when you're my height. I had to do it. So I did it. I had to do that every time I got in the car. And then the seller of the car neglected to mention to me that the air conditioning was not operant. Now, in his defense, he lived in the Bay Area. It's a Lotus Elise. He probably didn't use the air all that often. He may not have realized that it was inoperant. I mean, the Bay, when we were at Porsche, when I worked at Porsche Corporate, would get cars in that, didn't have air conditioning, 911 GT3s. We would send them to the Bay because that's the one place where maybe people could get away with not having AC. I didn't discover it didn't have air conditioning until day 2. Now, it's July of 2011. And my first stop was to go to Santa Barbara to see a friend of mine. And then I had to drive Southern California across the country through the desert. And that was a hell that I cannot even begin to explain. Had the windows down. There are several times where I pulled off at a rest stop or a gas station just to get water so I could pour it on myself. Like I would get a bottle of water, dump it on myself, get back in the car, keep driving. That was air conditioning. It was so hot in that car. Because remember, the hard top is on. I can't take the roof off. So I'm sitting there like this, unbelievably, it's buzzy, it's loud, it is hot, it is hell. For some reason, my mother agrees to meet me in Las Vegas and drive from Vegas to Denver, where she lives with me. Picked her up in Vegas, and we did the drive. And it was this hellish, and my mother is not into this kind of thing at all. She thought it was like a fun adventure, I think. It was 2 days on the road. We got to go through the mountains. We went over Independence Pass in Aspen. Like, it was actually kind of a fun, that was the best part of the drive. Like from Vegas to Denver, you go through the beautiful Red Rocks in Utah. You go through Western Colorado mountains. Like, it is actually a pretty cool part of the drive. And as we're coming over the mountains in Western Colorado, the check engine light went on. And I'm like, oh my God, I have so much longer to go in this road trip. I got to drive back to Atlanta. Like, this is going to be horrible. And my mom is with me. I'm like, what if this thing breaks down? So I took it to a Toyota dealer, Bighorn Toyota in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And I said, listen, this says Toyota Motor. Could you just read the code? He's like, nah, we won't look at that. It's like, please, I'm on a cross-country road trip. He's like, nah, sorry, not gonna happen. See ya. And I was like, okay, fine, I guess. Whatever, that was my life. I have a suspicion he had been asked before to do Lotus service. Like in Western Colorado, there was no Lotus. So if the 1 or 2 guys in that area, Grand Junction, Glenwood, who had cars like that, did get a ticket. That's another thing that happened. You know, it was bright orange sports car, and you drive a bright orange sports car in the middle of nowhere, and like, you are a sore thumb regardless of what you're doing. You know, I made a goal in that car not to be the fastest dude on the road because you're gonna stick out. And yet I'm driving through on I-70 in the middle of Kansas, and I see a cop way up ahead. I mean, like a little dot of a cop, and he's slowing down, slowing down, slowing down, eventually pulls on the shoulder. I go by him and he immediately pulls out and pulls me over. And he like claimed that he had gotten me on radar as he was driving like a quarter-mile up the road, but I thought the whole thing was a bunch of BS. Meanwhile, I'm on the seller's plates because so I'm like, I don't know what's gonna happen here. But he just gave me a ticket and I was on my way, and that was that. And I actually thought it was really hot in the Southern California desert, but I dropped off my mom in Denver, picked up my best friend in Denver, and then he came the rest of the way with me to Atlanta. When we got into the South in July, that was heat. I mean, Arkansas, I remember we went through a drive-through in Arkansas, and it was like intolerable. Like, it was literally torture. Just sitting there in the drive-through, just this sweltering heat. It was absolute hell. So we made it back to Atlanta. And I remember in Eastern Alabama being like, we're gonna do it. Like, this is gonna work. I can't believe it, but this is gonna work. But the thing about having a Lotus Elise is that by the end of that drive, I was already tired of the car. Like, it was like, this car is hell. You know what's funny? When I do the drive now, because I do it twice a year, across country from California, Massachusetts, and then back, in a very comfortable car with auto self-driving, adaptive cruise, cooled seats, I'll pass 70s cars on the road that some guy's out on a great American road trip, and I'll think to myself, I can't believe that was the norm. People would just do that back in the day. And so I kind of owned it for a little while, and then my friends all thought it was cool. Within 6 months, they didn't think it was cool anymore. And it was like, do we really have to take it? Like, it's so low and difficult to get in and loud and annoying and attention, obnoxious. And the other thing I didn't like about that car was it was pretty fragile. I had come out of having these company cars for Porsche that I worked for Porsche. I had several 911s in a row. And that car was a much more fragile car than a 911. You know, the hood, which was also the trunk, was like this flimsy piece. And if you pulled on the windshield wrong when you were getting in the car, you could bend the windshield frame. And I was used to driving these German sports cars. I'm like, what is this trash? So I sold it. I drove it cross country, and I only maybe had it for a few months after that. I sold it to a guy locally in Atlanta, who then sold it to someone in Abilene, Texas, who it now has like 85,000 miles, and it's still in Abilene. And people, that's the one car that I talk about sometimes where people are like, yeah, I live in Abilene, I see it around sometimes. I'm like, oh, my old Lotus. That's kind of cool. But that was my Lotus Elise cross-country story. I will never do that type of trip again. It was hell. No cruise control, no air conditioning, pure hell.
This month of VINwiki Car Stories is brought to you by Bridgestone. We've talked a lot this year about the Potenza range of tires for sports cars and supercars, but what I'm personally most excited about right now is the Dueler AT Ascent. It is their latest and greatest tire for on-road and off-road capability. I've tried so many tires for my off-road kinds, but this really seems like it's going to be perfect. It's got full-depth interlocking 3D sipes and is their latest and greatest product, so it should give me all the off-road capability and wet and snow and everything else that I want to put it through, as well as much better road manners. So check them out, as well as the whole range of Bridgestone products, to find out what's perfect for your ride at the link in the description below, and look forward to more amazing content on VINwiki from Bridgestone.